I've always thought that family history was really interesting. And we've always heard lots of stories through the years from Mum and from Dad and from all of our extended families about what their lives were like as they grew up. And I've always worried that once Mum goes, there'll be nobody left to tell those stories. So when my friend Roger Bates called me and told me he was getting into this new business where he was doing up these biographies, I thought, perfect opportunity to get Mum to tell her stories. So here's my mum.
My name is Noreen Woolsey. I am 82 years old. I was born in Vancouver, BC, but lived my life in Jasper National Park. I spent all my school years in Jasper, loving skiing and playing ball and tennis. One of my highlights probably in high school was being on student council and being the president of my last year there. I also was on, I'd have to look in the book again, but I also was sort of a reporter for our magazine or our little yearbook, and so it was really exciting. We had one teacher, Mr. Siddall, who was excellent, and in fact, even when I left home and went to Edmonton to go into nursing, he came to visit me. He was such a great influence on us. The principal of our school was exciting because it was after the war. He came from Ontario and he wore his overcoat. It was Air Force overcoat. And so we had seen Army people and Navy people growing up on the trains, but never seen anybody in an Air Force. And so we were quite intrigued with this. He was tough, though. He was a real tough principal, where Mr. Siddall sort of encouraged us more and was great. When I turned 16, my dad informed me I had to get dressed up really nice because some of my friends, he was taking us out to the dining room, to the lodge, and local people were not allowed to go out there. But fortunately, my dad knew the head fellow at the lodge. They golfed together, and they were both CNR employees in those days. And so we got to go out, and of course they had the great bands. They came from Ottawa, from the Chateau Laurier. The bands played in the off months in Ottawa and then at Jasper Park Lodge. So most of us had never seen an orchestra before. I mean, there were 10 players, and we got to get up and dance. There was 3 boys and 3 girls that my dad had made arrangements for, and this was the highlight of my teenage years. We had a great time at school. We had lots of activities. We even had one of the things, sporting activities that were great. We had our teachers that taught us to play tennis and badminton, and we had choir leaders, and so we had a choir group at the school, and cheerleaders for the boys' hockey teams, and they even got the students into figure skating, which I thought was exciting. And it was all done through the school, not like it is today through recreation. We didn't have those kinds of things because my sister, I can remember, she was 15 months younger than me, but she loved figure skating. I was always envious of her. I guess I could have been a hockey player, but no, she could figure skate, and she was carnival queen one year, which was a great thing. So we had lots of exciting things around the school, and our tennis courts were just on the school grounds, and so were the ball diamonds, and so it was very, very exciting, and we always were there to cheer others on if it wasn't our favorite activity, but we were there to cheer them. We were very fortunate growing up in Jasper because we could find jobs when we were 12 years old. And fortunately, the people that ran the restaurant at the train station were also friends of my parents. So that's where I got my first job, being a waitress. And the trains came in between noon and 6 o'clock, the passenger trains. So I got to work in the restaurant. And of course, I don't think we got tips in those days. Maybe if we did, it was a nickel. But we had a great time working. And every summer I had a different job. One year I went up to Mount Edith Cavell and worked in the tea room up there. And of course we stayed up there for the whole summer. And it was great meeting all these tourists. And one year I got to rent bicycles out at Jasper Park Lodge for a businessman in Jasper. And that was different. And I rode my bike out to Jasper Park Lodge, which was 3 miles to go to work. Another job was at Moline Lake, and I was supposed to be a waitress, but I ended up doing laundry and hanging it out on the line, of course, to dry, and the rain would come when you're in the mountains. So we were very fortunate. Stayed there for about 3 weeks and 4 daughters. Phoned my parents in 7 years, got a message to them, and had a wonderful life, to see if they would come and pick me up, because I couldn't stand it. So we traveled and did lots of different jobs. We took our swimming lessons at Lake Annette, and that was 2.5 miles from home, and we had to ride our bikes out there. But once we'd passed our swimming lessons classes, then we went to Lake Beauvert because it had a sandier beach and it was more fun. So lots of friends. We just had a great time in the summer. One of the things we did growing up was when we knew Dad was coming home on the train, we'd go down to the train station to watch him come in. And we always wanted to ride in a caboose, but that wasn't about to happen until I turned 16 and I got sick. Our doctor was ill, so my dad took me on the freight train to Edson to see a doctor there, where I ended up having my appendix out. Anyway, it was a great excitement. My brothers were lucky enough, they got to ride on the engine to the roadhouse, I think they called it, and with a fellow called Mr. Sliter. And I do have a picture of him. And he was a very exciting man who only had one daughter that babysat us when we were growing up. But living in a railroad town is very exciting because you get to see the trains come in and hear the whistles blow. My father was a conductor on the Canadian National Railroad, and so of course in those early days it was on freight trains, so he was away from home a lot or else was sleeping. He was very strict with my brothers. My sister and I, our punishment was staying in the yard where my brothers got the strap. His father was a fur trapper and trader in northern. Mom was our special person in the house because she looked after us all the time, and one of the funny things was in those days, you know, you had this old washing machine and she let us hold the clothes up to put on the clothesline. We thought that was really exciting until we got older and didn't like doing those things. But Mom had lots of patience. She played games with us, went to all our sporting activities. She was a great bridge player. They had lots of company come in, and Mom loved to bake for them, and of course we liked to sample all her treats. She was very involved, although my parents weren't involved in the church. But I had a neighbor friend that went to Sunday school, and she hauled me off to Sunday school. And that's how I got involved with the Jasper United Church and ended up teaching Sunday school, belonging to the different groups that they had for kids. And I can remember going to CGIT was really exciting. And I wanted to join the church, and I was 12 years old when I was going to be confirmed. But I found out I had never been baptized. And so they had to baptize me too. And my mother told me the story about she was going to have my two brothers, my sister and I baptized, and one of us got sick. So she asked the minister to come to the house to baptize us, but he refused. It had to be done in the church. So that was the reason I wasn't baptized till I was 12.
That was great.
I was married in 1952 to my wonderful husband, Boyd Woolsey from Saskatchewan. Came from a village called Penzance. We always call it the Pirates of Penzance. When we had our first child, my husband was busy working in the oil fields, so he took me home from the hospital to my mom's to stay there. And anyway, I didn't know what to do with poor little Ron because he was fussing a little bit, and I had to get his milk ready. So I took him into the bedroom where my dad was in bed and put him on the bed with Dad. And Mother was sort of shaking her head. She didn't think Grandpa would like this idea. Anyway, I went and got Ron's bottle and came back, and here was my dad playing with him and having him laugh, and we just thought this was exciting because my dad never played with us, but his grandchildren were his life. He'd lay on the floor and let them crawl all over him and take them outside and play with them. So he was really happy to have 6 grandchildren.
That's amazing.
My mother always wanted to be a nurse, but in her day you had to be 19 before you could go into nursing. And her father was quite strict with her, like she couldn't go out at night after she graduated from school unless he knew where she was going, and she had to be home by 9 o'clock. And I mean, when you're 18, to be home at 9? Anyway, she talked about nursing, and when I checked into it, I found out that it was a 3-year program. You got free room and board, and they supplied you with your uniforms. The fee, I think, was $125, and I had saved that amount of money. My father, when he was a young boy, went to boarding schools because of his dad being the fur trapper. Thought that the nuns were perfect. So I applied at a Catholic hospital, and unfortunately this hospital that I applied to, one of Dad's co-workers, his wife had graduated from the Misericordia Hospital in Edmonton, so I applied there and got accepted and had 3 wonderful years. The nuns were very good, strict, but very good. And we had some wonderful director of nurses that really taught us well, I felt. We had a lot of doctors that were a little tough on us at times, but some that were more friendly. And it was my first experience with meeting a Jewish family. One of my classmates was Jewish, and it was amazing. There was only one Jewish girl in each class. And we wondered about this because we had a lot of Jewish doctors on our staff. Most of them were Jewish. So that was a new opening for me to meet this family and become a good friend of Rita. In fact, we're still friends, you know, all these years later, and have always kept in touch. In fact, she phones me every other week, and she lives in Los Angeles. So, but nursing was wonderful, and there were 4 nursing schools in Edmonton: the Royal Alec, the Misericordia, the Edmonton General, and the University Hospital. And once a year, they had a big gala at the McDonald Hotel in Edmonton, and we had to wear formal evening wear, and it was a banquet and dance. And one of my friends from Jasper was supposed to come to take me to this dance. He worked at the bank in Jasper, and bank inspectors in those days only came on weekends to little villages like Jasper. So he had to phone and tell me that he had to back out. He couldn't make it. So there I was with this evening dress and no date. Anyway, one of my classmates said, well, her boyfriend was working with some other men and maybe he had a friend. So we all got dressed for this big do, and of course one of the nuns, Sister St. Christine, was there to inspect us because we could not have bare shoulders. And so we'd wear a sweater because she'd send us back to our room if we had bare shoulders, and they were the in thing then, not strapless like they are today. And anyway, this young man came, and his name was Boyd. But he didn't have a corsage for me. And that was really, what kind of a date is it? He doesn't have a corsage. Anyway, when we got out to the car with Shirley and Ed, there was the corsage that he pinned on my dress. So I was quite excited. We get to the hotel, and all of a sudden, this fellow, who is an intern at our hospital, come whipping up and said, Boyd, how are you? And I thought, oh my God. Anyway, this fellow was from Saskatchewan also. And he grabbed Boyd, put his hand in his suit jacket and brought out a flask. And I thought, oh, you can't do this. And the two of them are having a sip of this alcohol. Anyway, I could see the directors of nursing all standing, watching, and bringing us in. I thought, oh, I'm in trouble again. I've got not a very good blind date, but turned out to be a good evening. He loved dancing, which I did too, and we had a great time. He did ask me out after that, but it was always during the week, and usually we went for coffee and a treat. And it was a long, long time before he asked me out on a weekend, and I wondered why. Anyway, Boyd and his brother Jerry and another friend from Penzance rented a house, and they invited me for supper, and also his brother Eldon and his wife. When we got there for supper, it was so exciting. They had fried eggs, boiled potatoes, boiled carrots. That was our meal. Then they washed the plates, and then they served us a piece of cake for dessert. Well, we were sitting in the living room and having a visit, and there was a knock on the door, and this police officer was there. And so Boyd invited them in, and they had a little visit. And anyway, when the fellow left, I said, why are you having a police officer here? He said, well, I was dating his sister. She lived in Edson and was a school teacher, and I used to take her out on weekends. And I just broke it off, but he saw all the vehicles here, so he wanted to know what was going on between his sister and me. So he said, I decided to take you out on weekends. Nursing was a big part of my life. When I started to raise children, I thought, now how am I going to keep up my nursing? I was very fortunate with our first 4 children. They always asked me if I could come and work in the summer months when they were having staff going on holidays. So I sort of filled in on the maternity wards. They felt it wasn't heavy lifting for me when I had small children. And so I would do a month in the summer and help them out. And my mother loved to come and babysit for me, so this was great. It was her opportunity to have a good relationship with the children. And my father sort of enjoyed this too, because if he was home, he always had to bring Mother over by car because Mom never drove. So I kept up my nursing, and then when we moved to Stettler, we wanted to get away from the city because we both came from small communities, and we moved to Stettler to try it out for a year. And I found out that they were always looking for nursing staff. So I would do a night shift because my husband would be home with the kids and I could work the night shift. And so that worked out really well for me. And then the big thing that happened, after I had number 6, I went for my 6-week checkup, and the doctor offered me a job in his office, and he even had a babysitter lined up. Mind you, the pay wasn't very good. I had to negotiate with the business manager and told the doctor I couldn't work for that kind of money. But he phoned me back that night and had an increase. It was only $25 less than what I would have made doing shift work at the hospital. So this was great. And it was Monday till Friday from 9 till 5 with an hour off for lunch. And we only lived a block away from the medical center. So it was a great life. My first job was Dr. Malcolm, who did mainly all the maternity patients, who was an excellent doctor. I worked with him probably the longest, and Dr. Malcolm did all the deliveries in our community, but he also did surgery, and so that was part that I sort of thought was very exciting. Then I worked with Dr. Zender, who was a big surgeon in our community, and also was a neighbor of ours down the street, and knew all their families as well. And then I had the fortune to meet a fellow by the name of Dr. Barazan, who came here from Saskatchewan, and then he started dating one of our LPNs. And so then, of course, our LPN had to move out of town. You couldn't date a doctor in a small town. And so she went to Bashaw to work, but when she came to Stettler, she stayed with us. And to this day, Doris and I are very, very good friends. It's been a great life because I've got to know all the doctors socially as well as a work position, and have helped them with different things as well. And they've encouraged me to go on, and even when I went on town council, they were there behind me, helping me out. So I thought that was great. When we moved to Stettler, it was because Eldon and Roland bought a car dealership, a Ford dealership, and they asked Boyd to come and run the parts department. So that's why we actually moved to Stettler. They eventually changed their jobs and moved. Rolly was the principal of school at Morin, and Eldon went to Grand Prairie as an insurance adjuster. But we wanted to stay here. So my husband tried different jobs. He worked for a farm dealership for a while, and then he bought a mobile grain cleaner. So he started going out to the farmers and cleaned their grain, so they didn't have to haul it to town. He also, his brother convinced him, who worked for Starling and Innocent here, convinced him to buy this feedlot cleaning machine. So he bought that, and he had to go out and clean the feedlots, and he got our sons to work with him during the summer. So that gave them a smelly job in the summer, but it was great. He thought it was wonderful. Once the boys went on to university and quit, he sold the feedlot cleaner, but just cleaned grain, and he did that until he was 60 years old, when he had heart condition and had to quit. One of the things that I found out when we were on council is that they were talking about twinning with the community in Japan, and it was the town of Okope. We had a family in town who had a young fellow who worked at our hospital as a physiotherapist, who came from Japan. He came from Sapporo, and he was talking about what, you know, would be nice for our cultures to get together, because he thought Canada was wonderful. And I think this, and of course the family that were interested in helping him, he was the county reeve. So this is how he got the town involved. And we had this young man come to Stettler to see what our place was like, and he worked part-time at the hospital and at the school. And anyway, I found him a place to live and furniture for it, and had him every Sunday for dinner, and we got to know him well. And at that time, I think my second term on council is when the mayor and another councillor and myself went to Japan to see about the twinning program, because they wanted to send 10 students plus a couple of leaders over here. But they wanted us to reciprocate by sending our students over. So we had to do some fundraising to get our students able to go, because family couldn't afford to spend $5,000-$10,000 to send a student over for a week's holiday. Anyway, we did fundraising like highway cleanup and bazaars and bake sales and raise funds so we could have the exchange program. And it worked out really well. We found billets for the students that came from Japan and their leaders, and it became a real good program that we did for about 10 years. Family and Community Support Services, we always say FCSS, is quite a community program. And we've been very fortunate that we've had some great directors. I think Jean Gilbert was probably one of our first ones. And some of the things that she got going in our communities to help children to adjust to new communities, new families. It's quite a different story today. And I found it helped me understand some of the problems. And this is when I first learned about sexual abuse of children. Couldn't believe that a child, a 6-year-old child, could be sexually abused, when a home care nurse brought a little girl in from out east. And we found that they had to go to cities to get any help. And so we started this program, Communities Against Abuse, getting therapists to come to our community, and the children could be seen here to get help. And what it has done for our communities, that people in rural Alberta can get help instead of going to Edmonton or Calgary.
There's a picture of
One Sunday after church, we were having coffee, and I had 2 or 3 people come to join me with coffee, and I thought, this is sort of odd. Anyway, they approached me about running for town council. Jean Gilbert, Francis Nickel, and I can't remember who the other one was, but they wanted to know if I'd run for council, and I thought, why? But because I was involved with our church and plus other programs in the community and my type of work, they felt there was a need for another woman to be on council. Anyway, so after I came home and talked to my husband about this, we decided, well, we could try it and see. So I ran for council, but I had great people behind me that certainly knew how to promote this. Once I got on council, it was a whole different story, being involved in so many things. But because I was a health worker, I wanted to be on the hospital board, home care board. But what did I get? The library board, the, what were the other ones? Museum board, everything that I wasn't really associated with. But fortunately, I had my good friend Jean that got me on FCSS. So this is how I got involved with a lot of different community projects that I carried on. I was on town council for 2 terms, did run for the 3rd term, but that's when I had my problem with my arthritis, and so I didn't get enough votes. And we're very proud of our children, that we were amazed that some of them wanted to go on to university and how they were going to handle it and if we could afford it, because we didn't make big dollars in those days. And I probably never really asked them many questions about how were they going to manage. I know that Ron went to college in Calgary, and I think he lived with Carol for part of the time. Took advantage of that too, because I don't think he liked cooking. Dennis loved cooking, but Ron I don't think ever helped that much. They thought they could get away from helping around the house, they could go help Dad. So that was good. I depended on the girls to help more, especially with cooking, and as Carol was saying, she wasn't really the one that liked cooking, but that was okay, because we all have special traits and dreams, and we were so proud of what they could do, and we're very fortunate that all our children married and had children, and that was exciting, because for us to have grandchildren was the top of the world. Ron was our first child, and we were so excited to have a son, and he was born the day after my birthday. I was in labor, but the nun that was Sister St. Ovid, she thought I looked too tired, so she gave me something to make me sleep. So I didn't have Ron till the day after my birthday. I was a little disappointed, but very excited to have a boy. Then he grew up, loved sports, went to college. Dennis, our second boy, he was just 11 months later, and he was born in July, and he was an exciting boy too. And both my boys had dark curly hair, which the curly hair I think came from my side, but the dark hair came from the Woolsey side. Then we had Barb, our first daughter, and she was born in the fall, so that was a little different than having July and August. She was born in October. And she had lots of curly hair. In fact, we took her for her first haircut when she was 10 days old. Nobody could believe that she had all this beautiful curly hair. Then we had little Carol, and she was a little further behind than Barb, I think a year and a half, and she was really exciting and curly hair again. So we were so fortunate. Then along came our little Jeanette, but her hair was straight and lighter in color. And I can remember we were having trouble finding a name, but Jeanette Noreen was a name that Grandma Woolsey always wanted to have for a girl, so that's why we called her. And we spelled it different than what normally is spelled, but I think it caused her a few problems as she got older, because it should be Jean, not Jann. So anyway, we had a great time with this, and Grandpa Woolsey was so excited that we named her Jeanette. Then our last one was Susan, and she had dark, lots of hair, not curly, and as she grew up, she always wanted to change the color of her hair. Both her and Jeanette did that, but it was really good. And 4 of our kids went on to college and to university. The oldest daughter and the youngest, Barb and Susan, they took sort of secretarial studies in high school so that they could go to work in offices. So we were very proud of what our kids accomplished, and we're really happy. One of the most exciting things in our life for Boyd and I was having grandchildren. We thought this would be so great, and we ended up having 11 grandchildren. So nice to have boys and girls and little ones running around and coming to visit. And then some of our older grandchildren, this was Ron's daughter, Dennis's 2 boys, and Barb's son and daughter, have produced great grandkids. And this was a problem in Leduc because for Barb and Norm, his parents lived there, and of course I go to visit, and the kids didn't know what to call me because the other was great grandma. What was my name going to be? So we decided it should be Gigi, and they thought this was great. Just Gigi? So I now have 9 great grandkids, and they're just wonderful. I have 2 new ones that I haven't seen yet. We had planned on going to Edmonton yesterday, but it was Dennis's 60th birthday, and it was more important for him to have his son with him wakeboarding. But we hope to see him next week, and then his other son, Josh, lives in Vernon, and they just had a little boy, so it's really exciting to see them all. And we try to get together usually in the summer with most of the kids. And what makes me happy? I would think probably the biggest was my husband, and then my children, and especially my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I think they make our life that it would be hard for us. But friends are important. We sometimes sort of let our family take over and we forget about friends. But yesterday when I took a friend with me to visit some other friends, and they made her feel so welcome and told her, now we go every week so you'll come, and it just gave her the best uplift because she needed this. So we mustn't forget friends are very, very important in our life. What would you do if you won $1 million? Well, just think of the things I could do with my children and grandchildren. I could take them to Disneyland because that was so exciting. Our kids got to go see Disneyland through programs in our community, but my husband and I never got to go until we were in our late 50s. But we were so happy to be able to let our children go because it was such an exciting thing. And so this would be wonderful to help our grandchildren and great-grandchildren have funding so they can make this trip. I don't know. What would you do? What's the secret to a happy life? I think getting up in the morning, feeling good about yourself, and especially when you look out and see that the sun is shining, and not just to sit and feel sorry, but get up and do something, whether it's just making your breakfast or getting dressed and going out for a walk. But we have to look positive about every day.